If you've had a chance to watch the review video we did on the Haloview BT7 observation camera with built-in TPMS, you know we absolutely love it. If not, I will put a link up here in the corner so you can watch that video after watching this video. Now, believe it or not, Haloview has actually made this even better, and that's what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to explain to you how you can take your existing BT7 with built-in TPMS and get the latest and greatest functionality for it from Haloview. Now, there's a couple things you're going to need right up front before you even get started. You will have to have access to your monitor. The other thing you will need is what's called a micro SD card. It's a little card that goes into the side of your monitor. It stores data. You can think of it like that. You will also need a way to power up your monitor. I use a regular USB cable, plugs into the side. I happen to have a battery pack. That's where I get my power from. Now, the other end of this could plug into a wall. You know, if you had a thing to plug into the wall adapter, you could use that as well. But the most important thing you're going to need is the new firmware. So let's talk a little bit about what is firmware, then we'll go into how to download it, how to get it, and follow the steps from there. But at a very, very high level, firmware, you can think of it as software that is built into this monitor, and it's firmware is used in all kinds of different products. We're strictly going to talk about this monitor though, but think of it as software that's built in, and what it does, it tells the hardware, tells the monitor what to do. For example, if a user touches maybe, let's say, the bottom right hand corner of the screen, the software may tell, I'd say the firmware may tell the monitor to, oh, let's show this screen, let's show a particular screen. If a user touches an icon, it may tell the monitor to show another screen or something else on the screen as well. So that's kind of what firmware is at a very, very high level. That's really all you need to know. It's just built-in software that tells the hardware how to work. Now, there is a couple different ways to get the firmware. If you're not in a big rush, if you're not really computer savvy, one option would be to send an email to the Haloview support, and that's support@haloview.com. Tell them you have a BT7 with the built-in TPMS and you would like the latest firmware, and they will send that to you as well. Another way is just to actually just download the firmware yourself, and I'm going to show you how to do that right now. So let's jump over to the computer and I'll show you how to download the firmware, and then we'll go into the steps after that to upgrade our BT7 TPMS. Now, to start off with is I'm using a Windows computer, and I'm also using Chrome for my browser. But the way we're going to download this firmware is we're going to go out to the internet, and we're going to go to this address right here. Now, to make this even easier, I will copy this URL or address in the description of the video. So all you have to do is copy it and paste it up into the search bar. What you'll see on the right hand side, it got downloaded automatically, and we downloaded a file called firmware.zip. Now, by default on a Windows machine, that file is going to get saved to your downloads directory. So if you're not very, very familiar with getting around on a computer, just look for your downloads directory and you should see a file called firmware.zip. Now that we have the firmware safely downloaded to our computer, our next step is to prepare this micro SD card. If you don't know what they look like, this is one right here. Now, this card goes into the back of our monitor. We're going to go ahead and insert it here. Next step we're going to have to do though is to power up our monitor and format this card to get it ready to install the new firmware onto it. So let's go ahead and get this powered up and format our SD card. Now we're ready to format our SD card. This is a pretty quick and simple process. All we have to do is tap on our monitor. We're going to tap in the bottom right hand corner of the shortcut menu, and then where we see in the bottom right where it says record, we're going to tap the record icon. And in about the middle of the screen, you see where it says format, and just to the right of it, it says off. We're going to go ahead and click that till it says on. Now you're going to see a pop-up menu. It says confirm format. Now, before you do this, you have to understand, once you format your SD card, any files or any data on that card will be erased or deleted. So before you format it, back up any important files or anything you want to keep before you click yes to format. Now that you have everything backed up that you need to back up, go ahead and hit yes. And you can see right now that it is starting to format. If you look in the middle of the screen, there's a formatting message in the middle of the screen. Now that the SD card is formatted, our next step is to take it out of the monitor, plug the SD card into our computer, then upload the firmware onto our SD card. Now that I inserted the SD card into my laptop, let me just kind of explain what we're looking at. This left window represents our download, or my download directory. If you remember, this is when we downloaded the firmware. It went from the download directory, and that's where it's saved. It's a file called firmware.zip. On this right window, we're looking at the SD card. So this is where we need to save our firmware onto our SD card. Now, before we do that, if we go back on the left-hand side, we're looking at firmware.zip. If you're not sure what a zip file is, it's really just a compressed file. It can be made up of one or more files, and it compresses them to make it easier to send back and forth. So first thing we need to do is to extract what's inside of our zip file. So all I'm going to do is right-click on my mouse. I am going to come down here and click Extract All. And it's going to ask me where I want to extract this to. So we're going to put it in the downloads directory. This is just the default. We'll leave this. I don't need to show that, so we'll just hit extract. And you'll see right now it created a directory called firmware. We can go ahead and double click on that. Now this is the file that is inside of that zip file. This is the file that we need to save on our SD card. Now, something to be aware of on the SD card, if we come over here, you can see them on the SD card. It has a file in here called DCIM. We want to put our firmware inside of this directory. So let's go ahead and double click this. Now we are inside, you can see we are inside the DCIM directory. Now all we have to do is come back over here. I am going to hold down my left mouse button, drag this over here, and then let go. It is as simple as that. So basically, to kind of sum up, we just took the extracted file from that downloaded firmware.zip directory, copied it over to our SD card, and put it inside the DCIM folder. Now that we have the firmware installed on our SD card, we can take the card back out of the computer, put it back into our monitor, and now actually start the process of upgrading the firmware on our monitor. Our next step is to get into the firmware interface. Now the way to do this is we have to hold down the power button as we supply power to the monitor. So I'm going to hold down the power button, stick in my power, and hopefully you can see this. We are now in the firmware interface. Now that we're in the firmware interface, you can see what version of firmware you currently have. It's at the very, very top. So if you're not sure if you even need to upgrade your firmware, you can follow this procedure to get into the firmware interface. Write down your firmware number. You can see again it starts with BSJ, goes all the way to 240726, and you could just send an email to support@haloview.com. Let them know what firmware version you have currently and ask them if there's anything any new firmware. Now that we're in here, we want to go ahead and start the firmware process. A couple things to be aware of before we start this, though, is during this firmware upgrade, the monitor will reboot. It's going to reboot automatically, or restart itself. What's going to happen is there's going to be a Haloview icon that's going to come up, and as that comes up, we have to tap the last W in the word Haloview continuously to get us back into this firmware screen so we can do some additional steps. So let's go ahead. We're going to hit the enter key twice to start this process. You can see we have CMP OK-1 is displayed. Okay, now that it says reboot, we are going to continuously tap this W to get us back into our firmware menu. And we just have to do one last thing and then we will be done. What we are going to do is to reset this back and we should be all set. So what we're going to do is in the center you see where it says reset. This defaults to yes. So we're going to leave that as is. We will hit the enter key to go down to the next one. And this one we want to set to no. So we're going to use our down arrow. Set that to no. We'll hit the enter key one more time. This one here is also defaults to no, so there is nothing else to do. So we'll just go ahead and hit the enter key one last time. And that is it. Now if you successfully upgraded this, you will see now in the upper right hand corner we have the new functionality, which basically shows our sensors in the top left or top right hand corner of the screen. So this is a really nice feature. I really like this. We can see, we can monitor our tires as we use a backup camera as well. In the past, you had to go into one of the shortcut menus to get to the screen that shows all your tires, the pressure and temperatures. A couple things just to be aware of. If you don't feel comfortable doing these kind of steps, don't do them. You can actually, let's say, damage or maybe make your monitor non-functional if you don't do things correctly. The other thing is, if you're not sure if you even need to do this, go ahead and go into the firmware interface, the way I showed you, powering up, holding down the power button. Write down your current version of firmware and go ahead and send an email to support@haloview.com. Let them know your version of firmware. Ask them if there's any new or upgraded versions for you to use. There's no sense doing this if you already have the latest and greatest. We really love this observation camera and with the built-in TPMS. Again, I will put links below to show you where you can actually purchase one of these if you're interested or not. Again, we absolutely love them. I think you would too. It's really nice. We use them every time we travel. Hopefully you get something out of this. Hopefully you enjoy the Haloview observation camera with the built-in TPMS. Remember, always live life to the fullest.